Irving Roth was born in Czechoslovakia on September 2nd, 1929, and landed in the New York harbor in 1947 after Auschwitz and Buchenwald. The memories of the Nazi death camps never faded, and he now devotes his time and efforts to educating young and old on the horrors of the Holocaust and the evils and prejudice of anti-Semitism. Mr. Roth is the director of the Holocaust Resource Center, Temple Judea of Manhasset, and an adjunct professor at the University of Maine. He is a recognized speaker on anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, and is a frequent lecturer at colleges and universities in the United States, Canada, and Europe. As a Holocaust survivor, he provides personal testimony on his experiences during World War II. Mr. Roth received the Spirit of Anne Frank Outstanding Citizen Award for promoting human rights, social justice, and for conceiving, developing, and initiating the Adopt a Survivor program, which you will hear more about tonight. This program has been instituted nationally and internationally in public and parochial high schools and colleges. Mr. Roth edited and coordinated the publishing of a book titled Adopt a Survivor, An Antidote to Holocaust Amnesia. He and his son, Rabbi Dr. Edward Roth, co-authored and published Bondi's Brother, a book about his experiences before, during, and after the Holocaust. And just a quick note on that, you might see up here, stage right, we have his books for purchase, so you can come up after. They're $15, you can get a signed copy, and you can probably get a picture with him as well. Once we run out, we have order forms, so you all will be able to get his book after if you like. They also published a Holocaust study guide for social studies and language arts teachers, which encompasses a complete curriculum on the Holocaust and is taught in conjunction with Bondi's Brothers in elementary, middle, and high school, as well as colleges. Bondi's Brother has been translated into Hungarian and Hebrew. Mr. Roth also presented papers at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, the Scholars Conference on the Holocaust and the Churches, and at CAGE, the Conference on Alternatives in Jewish Education and Facing History and Ourselves. He is the recipient of numerous awards for his outstanding Holocaust education work and community service, and he also received a Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of Science in Electrical Engineering from Polytechnic Institute of Brooklyn. And he currently resides in Long Island, Nassau County, New York. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Irving Roth.
Thank you very much. It was a balmy evening in May of 1944. I've been in a cattle car for 3 days and 3 nights. The train stopped. The doors were split open, and one thing I want to do more than anything else is get out of there because of the odor, the closeness, and ability to move was something I wanted to do. And so I jumped off the train. Behind me, my grandfather. Behind my grandfather, my grandmother, my brother, my aunt, my 2 cousins, an older one and a 10-year-old one. And what greeted me was the most bizarre scene. As I looked around, all I saw was soldiers with submachine guns and dogs, screaming in German, "Raus! Mach schnell! Get out quickly!" and form lines. Take nothing with you. In the distance, I looked around and I saw buildings with chimneys, flames against the black sky. Needless to say, I was frightened. My parents were not with me. They were in a different city than I was at the time when we were taken away. I didn't know then. I just arrived in Auschwitz, the largest murder camp, death camp ever created by mankind. Why was I there? What crime did I commit? How many people did I murder? There should be in a place where mass murder took place. Must have done something. My friends, my crime was a very simple one. I was a 14-year-old Jew. My parents were Jewish. All my 4 grandparents were Jewish. That, my friends, was my crime. How is it possible that in the 20th century, in the most cultured, educated, sophisticated society in the world, people build death camps? How is that possible? After all, if you look at Europe, the turn of the century, the 20th century, you would see people living together. Jews and Catholics and Protestants and Russian Orthodox and Gypsies living and working together. My particular case, I lived in a democracy, a place called Czechoslovakia. A small city, less than a fifth of the population that you have in your university. Total population was 7,000 people. A lovely little city, rather modern for those days, because we had streets that were paved, sidewalks, a soccer stadium, tennis courts, library, and of course a school, which I attended. I started school at age 6, like most other kids in the world. It's a public school. And whatever the demographics of the town were, that's who was in school. Jews and Catholics and Protestants, Russian Orthodox, Gypsies, all going to the same classes. I liked school. In fact, I liked first grade. And I'll admit to you why I liked first grade. One thing is the school had a soccer team. At age 6, I thought I was a top-notch soccer player. I enjoyed playing soccer, and now suddenly I am on a team. As it turns out, I was a little better than anybody else. A little brag, maybe. And obviously, as you well know, if you're in any school and you are particularly good at sports and you become a captain of a team, you count for something, right? I am told that you have a football too. And you compete with another school, which we shall remain nameless, right? And so that's the first thing that happened. Was wonderful. So I walk into the class and everything is wonderful, and as I'm scanning the class, I look around and suddenly my sophisticated eyes, age 6, stop. I saw the most magnificent creature ever walk this earth. She also was 6 years old. And so as I looked at her and I say, well, now I understand that it's worthwhile going to school. But it took me 3 months before I said hello to her. And once I said hello to her the second time, but by the end of the first year, I carried her books to and from school. By the end of the second year, we did homework together at her house or my house. By the end of the third year, we actually held hands. And And that's it. No. So obviously I like school. And I was a good student in many ways. And I lived in a house, as most of you grew up in houses. This was a 3-generation household. My grandparents, who owned the house, my parents, and my brother and I, my older brother, 3 years older than I, we lived all in the same house. And you probably don't remember that far back when you were 6 years old, but living in a household with grandparents has tremendous advantages. One is when parents say no. I learned early that the thing to do is to go over to your grandfather and tell him how much you love him. And the rest takes care of itself. So if you need an iPod 10, and you have an iPod 9 and your father or mother says, no, you're not getting it, don't worry, don't argue, go to your grandfather or grandmother, tell them how much you love them, and you'll appear at the next possible occasion. And so I live in this wonderful little city with Jews and Catholics and Protestants. Turns out it was a fairly large Jewish community. About 2,000 out of 7,000 people were Jewish. And there were Jewish stores and non-Jewish stores. There were Jewish doctors and non-Jewish doctors. Jewish attorneys. and non-Jewish attorneys. And so the usual mixture of people in various businesses living in harmony. Now, my gorgeous little friend, well, happened to have been a Russian Orthodox. I was Jewish Orthodox. So we're both Orthodox, right? So it made a lot of sense to me. Nobody worried about it. And that's where I lived, in this wonderful household. When I was born in 1929, my brother was 3 years old. My parents were concerned a bit that my brother, who was 3 years older, who of course was the center of the universe and attention, he may not like to share that spot with anybody else. All the sibling usually thinks that everybody's an interloper. Because after all, he was there alone and adored and did anything he wanted, got anything he wanted, and suddenly is competition. Like, who needs it, right? So my parents decided that there needs to be a solution to that. And that's before Dr. Spock wrote his book on how to bring up children. So my parents had a very simple solution. We're going to get a nanny, and the nanny will take care of the baby, and this way mother and father can still adore this kid. She was Catholic. We were Jewish. Wonderful arrangement, from my perspective. As a child, of course, I got presents on Jewish holidays. You know, Hanukkah, Purim, and this and that. But having a Christian nanny who lived in our house, who had her own Christmas tree, I also got Christmas presents. It's a beautiful, don't you think it's a beautiful arrangement? This is where I begin to recognize who I am, and this is how I live. Freedom, opportunity, all the things that you can think of. Life was beautiful. Unfortunately, by the time I'm 9 years old, I live in a slightly truncated community. Country, rather. Just truncated. Why? Because the western end of Czechoslovakia was occupied by Germany. Czechoslovakia didn't want it, but the rest of the world says, do it. Because they're threatening a war. And so they appeased Germany by giving them a slice of Czechoslovakia. with a promise, with a written promise. That's all we want. This small piece. That was in September of 1938. The spring of 1939, the German army marched into Czechoslovakia and dismembered it. Suddenly, the whole third of the country on the western end becomes part of Germany. The eastern part becomes Hungary. And I live in a new country called Slovakia. There's a new country, has a new government. A fascist Nazi government that is elected by the people of Slovakia. And in the summer of 1939, I do what I always do every summer. In the mornings, I meet my friends, go to the park, we play games, we play soccer, go home for lunch. After lunch, go to the beach, play volleyball, ping pong, basketball, swim, snack bar. And this one morning I get up, get to the park. There's a sign on the gate. Jews and dogs are not permitted to enter the park. And just to make sure, as far as I'm concerned, I did not look at the sign at first as I'm getting close to it, but there's a policeman there as always. I say hello to him. He says, you can't go in. And if you try and go in, we'll arrest you. That afternoon, I go to the beach. I have my pass for the whole summer. I flash my pass, and the guy behind the little window says, you can't go in. Jews are no longer allowed to go in there, and you're a Jew. Suddenly, I'm separated. And then it continues in the same vein. Can't go out at night. No Jews to be seen once it gets dark. And during the day, if I go out, when I'm 3 years old, or 6 years old, or 66, or 92, as a Jew, I have to be identified with a yellow star. Not as a person, not as Irving Roth, as a Jew, one of those people. By the time the winter comes along, and winter in Slovakia is a bit different than in Florida, by about 60 degrees, the wrong direction. One day I'm told I can no longer wear my wonderful sheepskin jacket. Probably never saw one. Right? In Florida, nobody has a sheepskin jacket. But you know what Uggs are? It's some kind of construction. It's fur on the inside and suede on the outside. But I'm no longer allowed to wear it because it's a luxury. And a Jew is not to have any luxuries. I have to take my jacket and deliver it to the police department. Not because I stole it, because of who I am. All the Jewish women have to deliver their gold jewelry to the police department. Because that too is a luxury. One day my nanny is packing up and leaving. I say, why are you going away? And as a child, I said to myself, probably because I haven't behaved properly. I said, I'll be better. She said, no, you don't understand. No non-Jewish woman is allowed to live or work in a Jewish household. Two things that were very important to me is my nanny and my jacket. The laws oppress the Jews. We no longer are citizens in a way. We have no rights. We're disenfranchised. But the real problem, my friends, is that my friends began to treat me differently. In fact, one day in the spring of 1940, as always, I'm still carrying my friend's books. And as I get to her house, I hand her the books. I say, I'll see you later. Are you coming over to my house to do homework, or am I coming to your house? She says, no. I say, no what? Neither. In fact, I don't want to talk to you ever again. My father told me not to be friendly with a Jew because being friendly with a Jew could make you a Jew lover. And that's socially not acceptable. I never spoke to her again. And so comes June of 1940, and I get promoted and spending the summer not at the beach, because I can't go there. I meet my Jewish friends and we play together. In September, first week, I do what every other child in the Northern Hemisphere does, right? What do? We start school. And so I know where I'm going. So I get dressed, off to school, I get to the gate of the school, and the principal stands there right outside the gate, and I see a number of my friends standing outside, not going in. He looks at me and says, Roth, you can't go in. And why is that? What did I do? Throw a rock through the principal's window? I said, no, we no longer allow Jews in our school. On that day, my friends, in September of 1940, every single Jewish student, from kindergarten through PhD candidate, if you're Jewish, you're out. And with it, every single Jewish teacher, whether he be a nursery school teacher or a professor at a university, every one of the Jews were fired. Because they were a Jew. But very soon, Jewish attorneys can no longer practice law. Jewish doctors are limited who they can see. And then comes a rumor. Jews are no longer permitted to own a business. My father had a business, a lumber business, not like Home Depot. He produced railroad ties. You know those heavy chunks of wood under the tracks? Every year produced 50, 100,000 each year, shipped them all over Europe. And now, any non-Jew can walk into my father's office and say, hey you, Joe Roth, get out of here. It's mine. That's a pretty big problem. And my father, being a very smart guy, he decided he's not going to wait until somebody comes and throws him out. He'll ask one of his Christian friends to lend him his name, change the name of the company, change the stationery, and poof, it's no longer a Jewish business. Right? And so he calls one of his friends, named Albert Melesnik, and my father had been friends for a few decades. And they talk, and he said, Albert says to my father, Joe, whatever you need, I'll gladly help you. And so my father and he decides to change the name of the company, sign some papers, legalize it, and now no one can take away my father's business. 3 months go by and Albert comes to see my father and inquires, Joe, how is business? Great, says my father. I really appreciate what you're doing for me. Yeah, that's what I came to talk to you. After all, we are partners. Right? Look at the sign on this, my name on it. So I want half the profits. A few weeks go by, books under his hand, walks into my father's office, said, Joe, I like the way you're running my business. I'm not going to fire you. You can manage it. And not only that, I'm going to give you a salary. but the business is mine. Ordinary, nice guy was transformed. It was perfectly legitimate for him, legally, to take it away, because after all, his name is mine. Morally bankrupt. And that, my friends, what makes the next steps possible. The support of the people. As time goes on, they're trying to live there. And from history, you know that as time went on, from 1939 on to 1941, spring of 41, Germany was in control of the Europe, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Soviet Union, from Norway to Greece. With their allies, Italy, Hungary, Bulgaria, and every place they went, the same kind of laws. Some worse, some better. But in 1941 spring, Germany has made a decision. Persecution of Jews is coming along just fine. We have taken away all their properties. We have taken away their businesses. We no longer have them in our universities. Now it's time to get rid of them. There are over 10 million Jews living in Europe. How do you get rid of people? Very simple, my friends. You ask people to join special army type units. Older men who can't fight the war anymore because they're too old. And what you do is you tell them, we're going to teach you how to shoot a machine gun. And your job is not to fight the war. Your job is to go to villages, towns, and cities, gather the Jews together, march them out into the forest, and machine gun them. In June of 1941, the German army attacks the Soviet Union. And with the army, as it proceeds into the Soviet Union, totally unprepared, deep into the Soviet Union goes the German army, and behind them are these special units, whose job it is to do what I just said. Gather the Jews in towns and villages and cities, march them out into the field, or into the forest, or into a ravine, machine gun them, and cover them. And thus begins what the Germans call the final solution to the Jewish question. Freely translated, there shall not be a single Jew alive in all of Europe. The process begins in the summer of 1941. By the end of the year, there are no Jews alive in the Ukraine or Eastern Poland. They're gone. They're all murdered. From babies to old men and everything in between. But the process seems to be a little slow. All they did is 500,000 Jews were murdered in 6 months. 10 million Jews, it will take 10 years to get rid of them. And so the government of Germany decides that this is not a practical way to achieve the final solution. So when you have a problem, when the government has a problem, what you do is you convene a conference with people who are bright, people who have insight, people who have technological base. And so they convened the conference in a place called Wannsee. It's a little town outside of Berlin, on the 20th of January 1942. And the task of this group was to come up with a faster, simpler, less expensive way to get rid of all the 10.5 million Jews. The brain trust of Germany is sitting at this conference. 1/3 of the group has PhDs. And in 90 minutes, they come to a very simple solution. What we'll do is build death camps consisting of gas chambers and crematoria. We'll bring the Jews in, murder them, take the bodies, burn them. And all that's going to be left of the Jews of Europe is ashes. That's genuine. By the summer of 1942, 6 death camps are established. And in my town in Slovakia, in the middle of the night, there's a knock on every Jewish home. Of the 2,000, just 1,800 I picked up, given 10 minutes to pack a bag, and marched into the synagogue. The synagogue was about the size of this room. Imagine 1,800 people in here. I think, what's the capacity?
350.
350.
Imagine 1,800 people here. Imagine, though, not only that, but it's in the middle of the summer and there's no air conditioning. And imagine for a moment, as you look around here, do you see any bathrooms? You see any running water? Imagine being locked up with all those people for a day and a half. With no bathrooms, no running water, and no air conditioning in the middle of the summer. Day and a half goes by, the doors are flung open and under guard, 1,800 human beings. A week-old child to a 99-year-old man marched to the railroad station to cattle cars. And into the cattle cars they go. The train moves, disappears. Never to be heard from again. For me, I'm at home. Why? Because remember, my father is still running Albert's business. So he needs to liquidate the business, and once it's all gone, then we'll get rid of Joe Roth and his family. A few weeks go by, and suddenly, one morning, my grandmother and grandfather are arrested. We go into panic mode, you might say. Managed to get him out. But we know we are in trouble, and so we escape. Where do you go? The only place where the Jews are still at home is Hungary. The Jews of Holland, the Jews of Germany, Poland, all being shipped to ghettos, and from ghettos to death camps. Hungary decided that it's not an intelligent thing to do to get rid of the Jews. Because after all, they're at war. They need manpower. Why not use all the Jewish men, induct them into the slave labor force, attach them to the army, let them do all the work? After all, army needs to fix roads, build bridges, march in front of a tank, and find the mines. Why not use the Jews for that? And so the Jews of Hungary in 1942 and 43, as all this murder is taking place, they're at home. And so we get there. Complicated business. It's not quite like getting from New York to St. Petersburg, Florida. It's a little more complicated. Why? Because you have borders and guards and all that. But we get there. I do describe it in my memoir. So here I am. I'm 14 years old. It's the end of 1943. The war is going well for the Allies, not for the Nazis. On every front. The American army has occupied all of Italy by then. The Russian army has already pushed the German army out of Russia. Now they're at the border of Poland, the border of Romania. It's only a matter of time. All this will be over. But the high command of the Nazi Party of Hungary says to itself, Europe is free of Jews, except in Hungary. And so, the spring of 1944, 453,000 Jews are picked up from their homes in Hungary, put into cattle cars to Auschwitz, to the largest of death camps. And that's how I arrived in Auschwitz. My grandfather, grandmother, death camp. As we're standing in formation with nothing in hand because we were not allowed to take anything with us, suddenly I'm separated from my grandfather and grandmother. They're marching off towards those buildings with the chimneys and flames. They're told that they're going to take a shower. After the shower, they should take their own clothing, put it back on, it's going to be disinfected, and from there they're going to be transported to a place where they're going to get a hot meal. Sounded perfectly reasonable. But my friends, men and women were separated. To take a shower. Makes sense, doesn't it? And so they go into a room, they get undressed, and there are numbers on the hooks on the wall, and they're told to make sure you remember the number where you put your clothing, so when you get back, you shouldn't take somebody else's clothing. And from there, some doors, sign, bathhouse. They walk in and look up into the ceiling, and there are hundreds of shower heads with some water on the ground. The doors are locked, but no water comes out. A number of holes in the ceiling, and suddenly something which looks like crushed marble is coming down through the ceiling. It becomes a gas. Supplements. They can't breathe. Minutes go by and they're dead. My grandmother, my aunt, my 10-year-old cousin are dead, murdered because who they were. In the largest murder camp ever created by mankind. I was separated from my grandfather and the rest of them, and my brother. Together, he and I are marching off with about 300 men. The 3,700 women and men and old people and young people have been gassed. 300 are still alive. I'm assigned to work. I'm all of 14 years old, and I'm assigned to work with horses. Plowed the swamps around Auschwitz. I don't know about you guys. I knew nothing about horses, and even less about plowing fields. Swamps that were drained and dry and make it arable land. Early morning to late at night, and a diet of black coffee in the morning, and soup at noon, and the equivalent of about 3 slices of bread in the evening. On that diet, I, 14-year-old Irving Roth, I'm always hungry. Working from early morning till late at night, I'm always tired. But my friends, there's one other thing that took place in Auschwitz. Sometimes we would come back from work, under guard of course, into our barracks, wash up, go to sleep, get a piece of bread, and begin next morning. But some nights we would march directly to take a shower. Real showers. Except for the fact that after you got undressed and marched into the shower, there'd be a doctor in uniform look at you naked and determine if you should continue to live. If he looked at you and thought you were too skinny, or you walked bent over, or maybe had some boils, or your palate wasn't quite right, he would say nothing. Except look at your arm, which had a number tattooed on the arm. He would write it down. And next morning, a truck would pick you up into the gas chamber. Life and death. But I survived. All that. My brother survived. By January of 1945, the Russian army was 50 miles from Auschwitz. And one morning, we marched out, away from the Russian army, on a death march. You march or you die. I tried to stay alive. I keep complaining to my brother. Say, Bundy, I am tired. I am hungry. I am cold. She says, stop thinking of food or being cold. Say a song. You'll feel better. Survived the march together with my brother. Arrived in a new camp called Buchenwald. That's a camp you may have come across if you read Elie Wiesel's Night. Anybody read that book? Elie Wiesel and I were in the same barracks in Buchenwald. We're bunkmates. But the war's coming to an end. Beginning of April. Suddenly, one morning, there is standing information. We're not assigned to go to work. We're standing information. Suddenly, about 8,000 people are taken out of the camp on a death march. I know death marches. I've been on one. I know I'm not going to last because by this time, I'm down to 75 pounds. And so, I hide. Day after day after day. On the 10th of April, I'm hiding with some other people, and the guard comes along with the dog and finds me, marches me out. I'm standing in front of the gate in Buchenwald, knowing that I'm not going to last more than 24, at most 48 hours on the death march. A miracle. While we're standing there, suddenly there are airplanes overhead, American planes, circling the camp, bombing the city of Weimar, not 5 miles away. The guards don't want to be killed, so they wait. They wait. That day, the air raid lasted all day long, and I survived the whole day. By next morning, 11 o'clock, all the guards disappeared. Anybody in uniform disappeared. And 3 o'clock in the afternoon on April 11th, 1945, 2 American soldiers walked into my barracks. The Messiah just arrived. So if anybody wants to know what the Messiah looks like, one, there are 2 of them. One is black and one is white. That's the way it works. All they want to do is feed us. Because they looked at 2 battle-hardened soldiers who walked into our barracks, looked at 300 kids, 15 years old, weighing on the average 75 pounds. We broke down. But very quickly they gave us food, too much food. In fact, within an hour or so, a jeep came down with 2 big, huge vats of food. Split pea and porks. Ooh, wonderful stuff. All we wanted to eat. You know what happens when you haven't had a decent meal in a year? You pig out. That's what you do. Not a good idea. I don't recommend it. Very soon they take all the kids out of there. They gave us new clothing, German army uniforms, boots, hats, and into a new place. Not in the camp where we slept on those shelves. This is a luxury of the Ritz Hotel. Well, not exactly. It used to be where the soldiers lived. 4 people to each room. 1, 2, 3, 4. Room number 1. 5, 6, 7, 8. Room number 2. And so on. And I walk in and there are 4 beds with mattresses, pillowcases and pillows. And we get fed every day. And not only that, because we are kids, the commander of the American commander said, kids need something extra. So one day, the second day, we get chocolate bars in addition to food. After that one day, we get something spectacular. A carton of Camel cigarettes. Imagine 4 15-year-olds with no supervision in a room. I need to order a carton of cigarettes, so I light up a cigarette. First time in my life. I light up a second cigarette. I'm about to light up my 3rd cigarette and I don't feel so good. My lips are burning. My tongue tastes like I stuck it into something so bitter that I can't swallow. And meanwhile, I'm cold and I'm perspiring. And I'm sitting on my bed. I say, oh my God, what kind of sickness put together? You're going to die. I didn't. great because in 3 hours or so it all went away. And I never smoked another cigarette in my life, but I did not throw the cigarettes away. I traded it for chocolate. and so the war is over. I'm 15 years old. I'm in the middle of Germany. What do? I figured the only thing to do is to go back to the place that I was taken from, and maybe somebody from my family is going to be alive. I survived, maybe a cousin, an uncle, maybe my parents, because they were in Budapest, in the capital when this all was happening. And so I finally get back. Took a long time by truck and walking, and the bridges were blown up, the tunnels were blown up, so there's a lot of walking. I finally get to the village. First person I see, I ask him, I say, anybody from the Roth family survived? Did anybody come back? He said, yeah. I said, where? I run over, I open up the door, and there's my mother. I said, hi, Mom. My mother wasn't quite so cool. She fainted. Couldn't catch her breath. My parents survived. Quickly, I will tell you how they survived. They were in Budapest. One morning, my father does not get out of bed. My mother goes over and shakes him, and he is not responding. He is in a coma. Put into a hospital immediately. The doctor tells my mother, he has typhus, he's going to die. And even if he doesn't die, he'll never be able to think again because he's running temperature of 106 and 107. There's a nurse, a Christian lady, who looks at my mother and says, doctors know many things, but they're not God. They think they are, but I have seen people with this sickness in this kind of state who come back. Not necessarily fully, but... And I'll do everything I can. And this wonderful lady, this angel, sits by my father's bedside every single night and talks to him. And one night, after about a dozen nights or so, suddenly she looks at him and sees his mouth move. Listens to it. How long have I been asleep? Says my father in a whisper. My father comes out of the coma. Temperature's gone. He's fine. Soon, he's discharged from the hospital. But the Jews of Budapest are being shot on the street and dumped into the Danube, or shipped away by train, or marched on the death march. They need a place to hide. This wonderful lady lives in a one-bedroom apartment with her daughter, her granddaughter. The son-in-law is not at home because he's obviously a young man. He's in the Hungarian Nazi army. So now you have in a one-bedroom apartment, the three folks who live there, and my parents. But to make sure that when somebody comes in to say hello, or a policeman comes and looks for Jews, they won't be found. So they fixed up a hiding place for them. So when anybody comes close to the door, into the hiding place they go. Then one day, there's a knock on the door. Into the hiding place they go. It's not the police, and it's not a neighbor. It's the son-in-law, who is a Hungarian Nazi soldier, comes home for 3 days. As you can imagine, in a one-bedroom apartment, you can't really hide for 3 days. So the wife explains to the husband about these distant relatives who are living with us, but in reality they're hiding here. And you mustn't tell anybody. Because if anybody finds out, they'll sick the police on them and they'll be shot. And if you want to go to bed with me tonight, you're going to keep your big mouth shut. And so, my friends, my parents survived. Because somebody was willing to help. And the war is over. The laws are removed. But nobody was happy to see me. Came back to my town and nobody said to me, we're so happy you survived Auschwitz. The comments were, gee, we thought that the Jews will disappear. The Nazis did a lousy job. There's still some Jews alive. There are places the Jews couldn't go back. Couldn't go back to Russia, Soviet Union. Because the Soviet Union government, together with Stalin, decided every Jew who left must be a capitalist. And what do we do with capitalists? Execute them. Can't go back. Poland, number of people who try to go back, shot. Because like, who wants these Jews back? I got his pharmacy. Do I want the Jew come back and take away the pharmacy from me? Hell no. And so the Jews wind up in a place called the DP camps. You ever hear that word? Displaced person camp. Where? Same camp as before, except now there were no Nazi guards, there were just American soldiers and British soldiers. And the food was much better. And much more of it. But you can't go any place. Can't go to America because we have laws. We still do have laws, but not most people don't obey them anymore. It's called immigration laws. You've heard of them?
Yeah.
And there's a quota for how many people, how many Jews can come from Germany, how many from Austria, how many from Czechoslovakia. Very few. Very limited. So the Jews, having been displaced 2,000 years ago from their homeland in Palestine, said, I know, we'll go to Palestine. Right? No, because the British were in control. Remember our friends across the pond? And the war was over, so what do you do with the ships? You bring them into the Mediterranean, put a blockade, make sure nobody goes in who doesn't belong, namely Jews. 1947 comes along and the UN looks at this problem and nobody seems to want to do anything about it. The UN decides, I know what we're going to do. We're going to take the place that the Jews lived 2,000 years ago, and since then, Jews have always been there. Where the Jews live, we'll make it a Jewish state, and where the Muslims live, we're going to make a Muslim state. Seems like a perfectly reasonable solution. Tel Aviv, Jewish. Haifa, Jewish. Ramallah, Muslim. The Jews of the world are dancing in the street. For the first time in 2,000 years, they're back home. But on the night that the Jewish state declared itself a state, 5 Arab armies attacked Israel. May 1948. This new state, brand new state, with no army, no air force, no nothing, manages to hold off the armies. After a few weeks, the UN gets involved, other countries get involved, an armistice line. Stop where you are. The Jews say, let's negotiate, let's figure out how we're going to run this place. You have your area, we have our area, we can help each other. Hell no. Terrorism begins. Not that anybody cared about it any place except there. Another war in 1956, in 67, in 73, in 80. War after war after war after war. Everybody's trying to help, more or less. And there's a conference in 2001, I believe, north of here, someplace, away, Maryland. And in one set of rooms is the Prime Minister of Israel. In another set of rooms is the Chairman and President of the Palestinian Authority. And shuttling in between are the Americans trying to set up something. The Prime Minister of Israel says, look, let's make peace. We'll go back to the border which gives you 93 or 94% of the land that you think belongs to you. The other 5-6% we're going to exchange. Why? Because there's some strategic places we need to be to help us, so make sure nobody kills us. They'll even help you with the economy. The answer was, hell no. We're going to push you into the sea. And not just one prime minister, a couple or three prime ministers. And finally, in 2017. Let's talk, says Israel. The Muslim community would like to do that. But the Muslim leadership doesn't want to do that. I should sit at a table and shake hands with a Jew? Hell no. And we're stuck there. It's not good for the Palestinian people to do what they're doing. Why? Because if you look at Israel today, it's a flourishing country. They develop new ideas. You know, the Middle East is not full of water. At least not drinking water. So years ago, already Israel developed a particular system of desalinization. Those of you in physics know all about that, right? Or chemistry. It's pretty efficient. In fact, very recently, meaning in the last couple of 3 years, Israel built a desalinization plant in San Diego, California. Up to that point, San Diego was buying water. Now, San Diego is selling water. We'll help you. We'll work with you. Develop an economy. No way. Say what is now known as the Palestinians. They're not interested in the people. Hatred has taken over. From kindergarten through wherever else you go, you look at a book in the Palestinian territory and you find out something really horrible. Even in math, question in the books. If there are 10 Jews, you kill 5, how many do you have left? The answer is not 5. Too many! That's the propaganda. Lies and propaganda are being just promoted throughout the Middle East, throughout Europe, and I dare say, even in the American college system today. There's no point to this. Israel is the only state where the Jews have independence. It's the single Jewish state in the world. Reborn after 2,000 years of persecution, murder, hatred. Enough. Let's sit down and talk. That's where we are today. And that is what CUFI is trying to do. The objective of CUFI is not the hatred of the Palestinian people. No. The objective of CUFI is to look at the situation and solve it to the best satisfaction of everyone. That is where we are. And that is what I promote. This is what CUFI promotes. People living in peace. Stop hatred. Stop calling the only democracy in the Middle East an apartheid state. It's not true. If you've ever been to Israel, and if you hopefully you will go, you'll see. There are no signs on a bus, Jews can sit here, and Muslims here, and Christians over there. No. You sit where you can find a place, which is not always easy because the buses are crowded. You go to a hospital. If it's apartheid, there should be a sign for Jews, for Muslims, for Christians. That's what apartheid is, to be apart. I've been to the hospitals in Israel. Jews and Muslims and Christians and Hindus On the Supreme Court of Israel sits a Muslim. There are 50 members of the parliament who are Muslim. Yet there are thousands of people in the world, and some even in our colleges and universities, even professors, who say it's an apartheid state. It's a lie. Same lies that took place in my time, repackaged. Not true? And so what do I ask you? Only two things. One is, when your child is here in the school, and she'll say, there's something in my history book about something called Holocaust. What is that all about? I want you to remember I came to talk to you. An eyewitness who lived through this. I want you to remember it. Not only for your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. I want you to tell them this, my story. The second thing I would like you to do is join up with the 3.7 or 3.8 million other Christians to support Israel, so it can remain a democracy, independent state. So side by side, living with the Palestinian people and the Saudi Arabian people, even with Iran, whose singular most important piece of their whole country's agenda is the destruction of the Jewish people. That's a singular most important piece of their existence. The Iranian people never even met a Jew, probably. That must stop. We need to understand what happened, how it happened, and make sure bloody hell.